Hi there. Welcome to entry one of the Dylan's 544 blog. Today we are going to be replacing the gas tank, and I want to show you why. This car sat for about 10 years, as best we can tell, and over that time a lot of junk accumulated in the tank, and it's shown itself in our fuel filter. If you look here, you'll see our fuel filter is full of gunk and junk. Those are little rust particles. I actually have two filters here, and they're both plugged up, so that gives you an idea of just how much nasty stuff is floating around in this tank. So really the best thing to do in a situation like this is to pull the tank and either replace it or have it boiled out and sealed up, and any decent radiator shop can do that for you. Let's walk in here and I'll show you the new tank that I got. A few parts you're going to need, or that are a good idea to replace anyways. We have here a sender. This is the fuel level gauge. Go ahead and open this up and check it out. These are available new today. You can get these from a place like IPD or VP or any one of the number of the Volvo part suppliers. See, there's just a little float, and this activates your fuel gauge. And these are still available new, and they're not terribly expensive either. When doing a new tank, it's not a bad idea to do that. You also want to have the seal that sits around the filler neck tube. So basically what we're going to do is, this is the tank, and doing a replacement on a 544 is very similar to a 122 as well. If you're going to do the tank on a 122, it's very simple. Similar as well. It's actually a little bit easier because of the filler neck. We'll talk about that at that time. So what we need to do to get the old tank out, you can imagine this sits in the trunk. There's a fitting here that screws into the tank, and then that fitting also screws into the fuel line. So we need to disconnect the fuel line from underneath the car and then remove the fitting, and then the tank will lift out. You can drain the tank with this here, and we'll just move the drain plug from the old tank into the new one. And then you also need a length of hose here, as this is probably not a bad idea to replace. This is 2 1/4 inches in diameter, and the length of the hose is about 5 inches. I had this cut to about 6 just to give me a little more wiggle room in case something goes wrong. Fresh hose clamps are not a bad idea either. And this piece here, you can imagine. So the tank sits under the car, and then the neck comes up and attaches to here, which is where your filler neck is. This gasket's also available new. We're going to replace that as well, but to help keep junk out of the tank. And that is what we're going to be doing today. So step number 1 is to open up your trunk and remove everything that's in the trunk, because you're going to have to pull the mat back. So we're going to take a break. We're going to be back after we pull the stuff out of the trunk. Okay, so we got everything out of the trunk here, so what we're going to have to do next is peel the mat back and also gain access to where the filler neck is. So this little piece of paneling can be removed to help get it. Then I'm going to put this over here. And this piece of paneling is better days, but a lot of this stuff is still available for replacement. So we'll go ahead and peel the mat back, and it might be held on with some goo or glue or something. This one has some stuff holding it on. You can see the tank under here. Also got a little bit of water in this trunk, so doing this job it's not a bad thing to get in there and be able to take a look at the condition of your trunk. You can see we've got some. There we go. So we get the mat out of the way. This plate comes up, and that's where the sender is. And boy, look at that. That thing is rusted solid. The gas gauge in this car does not work, and I'll bet you that the tank being full of rust is a big reason why. So we're going to go grab a screwdriver at this point, and we're going to start undoing these screws that are holding this tank to the body of the car. And once we get those removed, we'll proceed with the next step. All right, so we've got the bucket we're going to drain our gas into here, which is a 5-gallon bucket. The tank on a 544 is not very big. 122 tank's about 10 gallons. This appears to be about 8 or so. It's a 5-gallon bucket, so we're going to drain as much out as we can. So we have ramps here. We're going to back the car into the ramps to lift it up a bit. If you have a drain pan that's a little bit shorter, you could probably fit it in without having to raise the car. But in our case, this is the best we've got, so we're going to go ahead and back the car onto the ramps, and we'll take it from there. So we have the car up on the ramps to lift it up a bit. We're going to drain the tank now, and just a good idea to also pop the gas cap off so pressure can move through the system and allow it to drain. So we're going to set this here for now, and we're going to find the right wrench and open it up and let her drip free. So this is a 7/16 bolt, as we've discovered. Sure we don't get covered in gas. So pull the sleeve back. Alright, there we go. So this is the underside of the car, where as you can see, this is the filler neck of the gas tank. We've got the car up on ramps. And there's a length of hose and a couple of clamps that hold it in place, and we've already broken one of the clamps off just because this stuff is so old and just kind of caked on that there's really no way for us to even get at those screws up there to try to loosen them in any way. So I'm going to bust that other clamp off, we're going to cut the hose to get it free, and then we're going to pull the tank out, hopefully. Alright, so we're going through and removing the screws off the top of the tank. We ran into some minor trouble where the screws were really kind of rusted in place, so I'm going to move this light over here and give you a better angle of what's going on here. So there's a few tricks to dealing with this. One is that we got our penetrant. I like P-Blast or PB Blast or whatever it's called for this kind of thing. I find it works better than WD-40 does. You want some kind of penetrant, and I hit all of the screws from the top, and I also got underneath the car and sprayed them from below. Let that soak for a little while, and then the trick here is if you have a screw that's particularly stuck, is you get it kind of set, you can beat on it with a hammer, and that kind of seats the screwdriver into the head of the screw, and then you can kind of work your way out a bit. As you can see, that helped to get that screw up, which wasn't budging before. So we're going to go ahead and use this technique to get these screws out. And I also have brand new screws that we bought at the hardware store. These are 3/4 inch in length. They're a little long, but they'll work. That's all they had. 12 by 3 1/4. If you find 12 by half, it'd probably work just fine. So that's the next step. We're going to remove all these screws, and then we're going to get underneath the car and remove the fittings from the back of the tank. Alright, here we are under the tank, and time has come for us to disconnect the fitting that goes into the tank and runs up to the fuel pump. It's a hardline hose here, and you see there's two parts. There's this part here, and then this part here. This part threads on to this fitting, which threads into the back of the tank here. And the two socket sizes you're going to need are a 5/8 here on the bigger one, right there. That's a 5/8. And then I had to wrench on this a little bit to get it to break loose. You may or may not have difficulty with that. And then the other size you'll need is a 9/16 for this one that fits into the back of the tank right there. And I'm going to probably need 2 hands to wrench on that. So anyway, that's where we're at. We're going to remove this fitting. We got the filler neck removed, and then after we do this, we're going to pop the tank out. Alright, we're at the point now where we're ready to pull this tank out, and I'm just pulling back this old goop, whatever was here before, to seal the tank. We're going to seal this up using Butyl putty, which is available at like marine RV stores. It stays pliable under a wide range of temperatures and applications, and I use that anytime I seal things on a flange like this because you can tighten it down and it will just keep water out. And also useful if you decide to rebuild a heater box in one of these things. So now comes the moment of truth, where I'm just kind of tap around here. Probably would be more wise to use a rubber mallet when dealing with a gas tank, but we haven't exploded yet, so that's good. And I think this thing should just lift out. So what we'll do is I'll push from underneath. All right, here we go. Oh shoot, still had some gas in there. And we forgot to disconnect the tank sender, but we'll go ahead and do that now. So anyway, tank has been removed. On to the next step. Alright, so we got the tank out, disconnected the wire for the sender. I just got the screws out. We're going to take a look at this for the first time, and boy, that is really nasty, isn't it? So this thing's not even barely moving. So this could be why the fuel gauge didn't even work. This thing is just rusty to pieces, and I don't know if you can see with the camera, but the whole bottom of the tank in there is just full of rust and dirt and all kinds of other gunk too. So this is definitely a tank that needs to be boiled out, and the sender for sure needs to be replaced. So it's a good thing that we're doing this now, and it's time to go clean up the flange where the new tank's going to sit and start piecing that all together. Alright, so here's our new sender. Nice free range of movement, nice and clean. Here's our old one. You can see, compared, it's crunchy movement and just dirty beyond all reason. So I think we're going to have a working gas gauge when this is all said and done, which is very exciting. Alright, so we'll leave that there for now. Now the next task is going to be here inside the car, where we need to make sure our flange is nice and clean. And this one appears to be in pretty good shape. When I did the tank on my 122, I actually put a bit of paint down to protect this flange here. Now somebody put some kind of gasket or seal here before. You can see that's seen better days. So we're going to pull that stuff up, and then we're going to reseal it using butyl tape next. Hint for those of you doing a 122 tank compared to doing a tank like this one here. On the 122, and this applies for a sedan, the filler neck's back here, so and it's part of the tank, so when you lift the tank up, you want to lift it up from the back and then slide it forward. And there's a trick for getting reinstalling the rubber donut grommet that goes around the filler neck, and we'll talk about that when we start putting this thing back together. So next task, we're going to clean up the edge of this flange here, and we're going to use some brushes and some other things to do that. Alright, at this point we are going to blast out the hardline and hopefully get any of the gunk out, because we had a look and it was full of junk. So I'm going to disconnect the fuel filter there and the hardline. We're going to spray some carb cleaner back and hope for the best. Okay, we got the flange cleaned up here. You can see we hit it with some degreaser and a sponge and clean that up real nice. And so this particular flange is in pretty good shape. It's not rusty, and we were able to get all the old seal and gunk off, so we're going to go ahead and leave that. We'll put butyl tape on it. If the flange was rusty, or if there's other issues, you'd want to probably hit it with a wire wheel, take the paint off, get some enamel. Typically I'll just use whatever I find in a rattle can when I've done this before, and spray down the lip, let it dry, and the main thing is you just want to have paint on there to keep the rust out. So we also shot some air through our fuel line here and produced a fair volley of gunk, so it's good to get that stuff out of there. Oops. At this point we are ready to put some butyl tape on the new tank and start connecting all this stuff up, and to get this all back up and running. Okay, so we have the drain plug here off the old tank because the new tank that we got did not have a plug in it. So this probably goes without saying, but you always want to make sure you have a plug in there and that you're not going to dump fuel all over the place once you get the tank installed. So we're going to go ahead and thread that in. Now, if you do need to reuse your old plug, make sure you clean the threads up a bit so that you don't strip it out or cause problems down the road. And this doesn't need to be super tight either. That's probably good enough. And there you go. So we have a nice big old roll of butyl tape here. And butyl tape's pretty amazing stuff. It stays pliable when the weather changes and the temperature changes, and it smushes down and it creates a really good seal. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to peel off little bits at a time. And good idea to wash your hands before you do this. I wouldn't wash my hands just to make sure you're not covered in gunk and dirt, because you don't really want to plant that into the seal. So we're just going to kind of put this down on the lip and kind of poke it down a bit as we go. And you'll notice I'm actually covering the screw holes here, and that is by design. We will push through with the screws when we tighten them down, and the tape will get into the butyl and it will cause more of a seal. It's okay to do this. So we're going to go ahead and put butyl tape around the entirety of the lip here, just like this. And once we have that, we'll be ready to drop this thing into the car. Alright, we're now ready to put this thing into the car. So here we go. It has to go at this angle. Down there too. The nice thing about this butyl tape is that it's not overly tactile, so if you accidentally set it down and it's not quite in the right place, it's not going to hurt anything. So there we go. Okay, so we bought some fresh screws that have the same thread, and we're going to go ahead and start popping screws in and start tightening this thing down and putting the whole tank in place, and then we'll connect the filler neck after we do this. Okay, so we got the tank in the car now, and we're back underneath, and we're going to reattach this fitting into the tank and then into the fuel line here. Of note, we blasted some air through the line there to help blow it out, and it did push a bunch of junk back. And so something to keep in mind when you're doing this. If you're doing this because you have a really nasty or dirty tank, you want to make sure your fuel line is clean as well, and spraying some carb clean down might help, and hitting it with some air if you have compressed air is a good idea. If not, you might try your hardware store to find some kind of pipe cleaner type object that you can just shove through the pipe and see what you can come up with. So we're going to go ahead and thread this in here, and we'll tighten it down with a wrench in a moment, but make sure that's all nice and tight. So once we get that tightened down, we're going to attach this piece as well. So that's the next step. Okay, we got that fitting tightened, both to the tank and up there. I cheated and used the 14mm to tighten the nut to the tank, which I think is the same as a 9/16. And then the outside one, or the bigger one's a 5/8. So now we will connect the filler neck to the tank. And I don't know how good of an angle we're going to be able to get here, but you can see we already got the hose attached to the filler neck, and I tightened this clamp down earlier, and now we're going to try to push this thing on, and here we go. With some assistance, we're going to make sure that up at the top up there that it gets nice and straight. I don't know how much you can see, but we used a little bit of silicone spray to help make things easier, and if you're going to do that, you want to make sure it's silicone spray that is safe for rubber and specifically fuel line. You want to make sure that it's not going to cause any issues there. So we're going to tighten these two clamps down now that we've got this on here. We're going to also check outside of the car to make sure that the new filler neck rubber donut washer is sitting flush as well. Okay, so we got the sender installed, tightened down, and we used all new screws that we got from the hardware store. They're 1024s, so highly recommend using new screws all the way around so you don't break anything. So now is time to connect the wire for the sender, and the cable, or the wire that we have, is so old and nasty and corroded that we're going to splice a new little bit of cable in. And I've got a new ring terminal here, and we're going to go ahead and bolt that on, and then we're going to run the wire and connect it in with handy dandy butt connector here. So we're going to tighten this bolt down and hook it up, and we'll see if the gas gauge is going to work. Okay, we've got the tank in, we've got the sender in, we've got everything wired. We went ahead and put all of our junk back in the trunk. We put the mat back down, and then put the stuff back in the trunk. So, the car's been off long enough that I'm going to need to use the choke to start it. And keep in mind, when you do replace the tank and blow the gas through the line, that it's going to take a little longer than normal to get started, because the pump's going to have to prime, the system's going to have to suck fuel through, so we might be sitting here cranking for a little while. That's okay, it's normal. So let's see. Get some choke, make sure it's in neutral, and we'll just turn the key. I think it started up because I still had some gas in the float holes. Alright, that's it. I hope this has been helpful for you. We're going to keep on doing this series with any luck, so if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at the information posted below. In the meantime, drive safe.